Hello, sisters. Lesbian Psychologies, Explorations and Challenges. Part 3, Family. Essay number 11, Lesbian Families, Psychological Stress and the Family Building Process, by Sally Crawford. Most literature on the family makes the assumption that the term family refers to the heterosexual unit of mother, father, and children, or to the heterosexual single parent family. This image of the lesbian hangs on tenaciously despite the existence, this image of family hangs on tenaciously despite the existence of many lesbian parent families with special characteristics and needs. Family therapy literature virtually ignores the lesbian family with children, although there has been an increase in material on lesbian couples. The reasons for this lack of attention are various. Some women still argue that a lesbian headed family unit is not a family, and that children need to be protected from this lifestyle. Others insist that lesbian families should be understood and treated clinically, exactly as any other family. Both of these arguments are faulty. The first for obvious reasons, and the second because it is well meaning in its well meaning way. It fails to understand and deal with the particular pressures, problems, and issues with which lesbian families must cope in a homophobic culture. It is also often assumed that a self identified lesbian will not be a mother if she does not have children before coming out. Although this assumption has been shared until recently by the straight world and the majority of lesbians, within the lesbian community, it is dying a rapid death as more and more women make their own decisions about whether or not to have children. While straight peers have struggled to be clear that their decision to bear a child does not result from a message about quote unquote compulsory motherhood, lesbians have struggled with a different message based on the compulsory childlessness that the mainstream culture has overtly and covertly attempted to impose on women identified women. It is encouraging that lesbians no longer assume that their life choices preclude mothering. Any woman choosing to have children must confront both the myths of mothering, and a variety of emotional issues evoked by parenting, such as feelings about one's own childhood and family, intense previously untapped emotional responses that children may elicit, and concerns about changes in one's life structure. The list is long and familiar. In addition, lesbians have other issues to confront: the newer romantic ideals of raising children within an alternative family, the question of how to start a family, and the inevitable stress in a homophobic culture. Despite the many creative family structures that lesbians have developed to nurture their children, such stressors are an overriding concern in a dominant culture that is troubled by difference. This chapter considers some of the stressors that lesbian families face. My focus is intended not to portray lesbian parenting in a negative light, nor to imply that traditional families do not have their own problems unique to their structure and role in society. It is intended, rather, to help lesbians starting families to identify and cope with issues that they may not otherwise anticipate, in spite of their experience with homophobic oppression. 2. The identification of stressors is offered to aid therapists working with lesbian families in the identifying of the many challenges that lesbians face in the process of family building. I will address the relationship of the lesbian family to the outside world, including the dominant culture, the lesbian community, and the family of origin. I will also raise issues to consider within the family, such as the family planning concerns of individuals and couples, and the specific issues for co parents and children. In addition, I identify the locus of responsibility for this oppression and its impacts on families in the homophobic cultural context, and implicitly highlight the tremendous strength that lesbian mothers have brought and continue to bring to the care of themselves and their children. The material here is drawn primarily from my clinical work with lesbian couples and families at a public mental health clinic. This population is predominantly white and 25 to 45 years old. There is a wide range of class background and of context for both clients coming out and their ongoing lives, in that they may come from both an extremely rural environment where there is little or no other lesbian contact and a small city where there is an active and political lesbian community. Individual concerns. Lesbians choosing to have children have much to consider in assessing their best parenting options. Such factors as the status of their relationship, willingness to be a single parent, personal values with regard to pregnancy or adoption, financial resources, options defined by the cultural political climate, and the support networks. These issues need to be considered by each individual, including those in couples or extended families planning to parent together. All women experience some ambivalence about parenthood, in the decision stage and forever after. It is very difficult for lesbians to find a safe place out in the world or within themselves to deal with this ambivalence. The world forces lesbians to justify continually their right to have children and to prove their unqualified competence. As a result, a lesbian may feel that she has to act as if the ambivalence isn't there, lest it be misunderstood. She may need to deny the ambivalence in order to muster the incredible energy that she will need to have or get a child in the first place. The potential lesbian mother needs to create an environment in which there is room for scary and troubling parts of this process. At the same time, the prospective parent needs to highlight her strengths and to remind herself that lesbians have been good mothers for thousands of children. The decision to become a parent may arouse feelings of internalized homophobia. Lesbians should not be surprised or ashamed to find themselves grappling with questions such as: is this natural? Is it okay for lesbians to have kids? Am I hurting my children? Especially when they have problems, as all kids do, at some point or another. Is it unfair to bring them into a homophobic world? Am I a woman who is able to be a mother like any other woman? These old questions are important to take seriously. They are questions that have been answered in positive ways by many lesbian mothers over the years. In deciding between adoption and alternative insemination, the unique aspects of each choice must be considered. The stress of going through the adoption process can be great. There is no easy answer to the dilemma of whether or not to be quote unquote out to your social worker. The wisdom of this decision depends on agency policies and on the general political climate with regard to alternative families. Because lesbians cannot adopt as a couple, the method often disenfranchises the non adoptive parent, who becomes invisible during the process. For a couple who has been quote unquote out, the going back quote unquote in often required is painful. In addition, the support and dialogue offered to heterosexual couples during the agency's home study may not be available to lesbian couples. They may want to build this process into their family elsewhere. Often, agencies offer special needs children to single parents, or, if the parent is white, children of different cultural backgrounds. It is important to consider the extra demands, money, and energy a special child requires and the various ways in which a parent's life will be affected. For example, Children with special needs often require the services of agencies and programs that may not recognize or support the family. The potential parents need to evaluate their tolerance for and skill in dealing with this type of frustration. If a child is from another culture and the parents are white, their own racism and the racism in the immediate environment should be examined to assess realistically what positive connections to the child's cultural heritage the parents can offer. The communities and the family of origin's emotional and political views on cross cultural adoption should also be considered. There will be those who think it is wrong to adopt a cross cultural child, and those who will deny the significance of the child's ethnic and racial background. Because the issues about one's origins are even more complex and cross cultural than in other adoptions, the lesbian parents should realistically evaluate the adequacy of the support available to the family. If the choice is to use alternative insemination, there are other important considerations. If the donor is known, the father's involvement, if any, in the child's life should be worked out in advance in order to anticipate the complexities and maximize the advantages of having an active parent who is not a family member. If the donor is to be unknown, or if there will be no contact between the father and the child, the parents will need to examine their own values and beliefs about the meaning of this choice, to themselves and the child. The parents need to be prepared to explain appropriately to the child the reasons for this choice and to attend to whatever questions and feelings the child has about her or his origins. Some potential issues for the child are elaborated in the section of this chapter on child concerns. If the parents do not have personal experience with this situation, they may want to talk to peers who do. The family of origin's possible response to a pregnancy should also be assessed. As with coming out, the family's initial response may not be positive, and the parents may experience another instance where others are not enthusiastic about a joyful event in the parents' lives. This attitude is often hard to accept, particularly in contrast to the celebration of straight peers and siblings in pending motherhood. The blended or step family option is not new. Lesbians have formed families in this way for years. What may be new is the conscious decision to become a family together and the increased awareness of the importance of validating this unit. The special concerns of stepfamily formation in general are well documented in the literature for heterosexual stepfamilies. The unique challenges for lesbian parents and their children in this situation are described later in this chapter. The dilemmas of rearing a child alone require special preparation. The lesbian choosing to parent by herself should read about the single parent experience and talk to other single parents, straight and gay. Financial strains will be greater, and isolation may be even more severe than experienced by lesbian couples or a heterosexual single parent. Help, support, and encouragement from family of origin or friends is extremely important. The lesbian will need to ask herself whether she can manage working and childrearing on her own. What possibilities are there to increase the involvement of caring people in her life? Can she visualize the nitty gritty? A day at home alone with the flu and a child who feels like being up and about? Both members of her couple must also address those questions because all parents are potential single parents. Finances have serious stress implications for the female wage earner in a discriminatory workforce. The income of a single parent, or two female parents, is often so low that money can be a substantial source of daily stress. Many lesbians, like many others in our society, cannot afford the luxury of taking regular breaks from child rearing. A potential mother will need to assess her financial resources as well as what she knows about herself and money stress. If she has to deal with a welfare department, There are many accompanying stresses, not the least of which is urgency, having a state agency scrutinizing her lesbian family. She will have to consider the impact of this on her life and her willingness to deal with the intrusion. Whatever the particulars of any individual's or a couple's situation, realistic planning is the best approach because it is inherent in the parenting experience for plans to be interrupted and for the unpredictable to reign. Isolation. The isolation that lesbian families experience is a most difficult, painful, and hard to anticipate problem. Lesbian mothers often feel caught between at least two worlds, and their whole self may not get acknowledged in either place. It often happens that a lesbian gets her major support from for the mother part of herself from straight people who cannot understand or relate to the depths of the significance of her lesbianism. At the same time, she may get major support for her lesbian self from the lesbian community, where there is less understanding of the depth of the impact of becoming a mother on her person and life. This lack of understanding can create some lonely moments and spaces in her life. Having children pushes a lesbian into regular social contact with the straight world, even if this is not already part of her life. Children operate quote unquote out there and need parents' ongoing involvement in that part of their lives. Many lesbian parents find that they themselves need straight parents whose lives are also organized around parenting for support. However, this need may not be reciprocal because the straight family often has its own support network of families based on shared friendships and lifestyles in the straight world. Lesbian parents who turn to the lesbian community for support may not find what they need, although this is changing as more lesbians become parents. When the emotional support and interest are there, the structure of the lives of lesbians without children may be different enough on a practical level that little connection over the children is possible. In some communities, conflict may arise between what the parents feel is right for their children and what the community feels is the correct way to raise the children outside of a patriarchal mode. Such political conflicts may be compounded for the parents of a boy. Dealing with this stress takes strength, and the criticism of other lesbians often hurts more than that of the straight world. At best, it causes more anxiety. Solutions to life's problems suddenly seem less clear and simple. Third world parents may find themselves caught in a particularly complex web of opinions about what is good and bad for children as they attempt to stay connected to two divergent communities. Women of color already know what it means to try to balance their needs and their children's needs in sight of a straight, third world, and a lesbian context. They recognize both straight homophobia and the racism of a predominantly white lesbian community. Third world parents' own sense of alienation and isolation may be compounded by the need to protect children who must survive both the racism and homophobia to which the family is subjected. In spite of its occasional past contributions to the isolation of lesbians, the lesbian community is the primary antidote to the alienation of the lesbian family. Lesbian mothers and their children, whenever possible, need contact with other lesbians and lesbian families. The availability of this contact varies widely and is affected by such variables as where the couple lives, the size and the diversity of the lesbian community in general, and the degree to which the lesbian couple are out as lesbians. The threat of custody problems has often blocked making these connections, in that looking for support and allowing one's children to see that they are not totally alone with the issues. with this issue has been known to increase quote unquote ammunition in a custody battle. Another ironic twist where healthy adoptions have been treated as aberrant behavior to be punished. Nonetheless, lesbian families continue to find each other, and the formation of lesbian mothers' support groups, as well as the occurrence of informal family get togethers, has done much to help families cope. There may be significant class differences between the lesbian families who find one another, because the lesbian community is more economically diverse than most communities that bond together out of a basic similarity. For this reason, class differences may affect the connection between families just as they universally do between individuals. However, there is already a history of commitment to grappling with these issues in the lesbian community, and as hard as they may be to achieve, resolutions are probably found more often than in the straight world. The presence of a lesbian community in general, regardless of the availability of other families, is of significance to the single mother and the parenting couple. It can provide them with a friendship network from which they do not have to hide their family life. It creates social spaces where they can get away from parenting and for the couple not to deny their relationship. And it is a continuing reaffirmation of identity for a unit that has to struggle to stay in touch with who they are and what they are doing. Lesbian parents report that an evening with lesbian friends or at a lesbian community event can feel like quote unquote coming home after a day spent dealing with the straight world in their own and their children's lives. Invisibility. Family is defined in a certain way in this culture, and although this definition is shifting somewhat, the lesbian two parent family is not recognized as such. The lesbian family is most likely to be recognized as such in the single parent family, and this recognition, conveniently for the larger culture, skirts the lesbian aspect. For any single mother or for a couple, the building of family is an extremely important task, and it is a task with certain phases. The establishment of family rules about internal family life and about interaction with the outside world. The definition, spoken or unspoken, of boundaries around the family, and then the introduction of a child into this, with the consequent shaking up and reorganizing of it all. Meanwhile, as the parents struggle with all of this and try to help their children feel part of a stable family unit, the world behaves as though they are not a family at all. Clear boundaries around the heterosexual family are encouraged and respected by the larger system in many significant and little ways. The boundaries around the lesbian family usually are unrecognized, ignored, or reacted to with hostility and negative judgment. Language is an important aspect of visibility, as are cultural rites of passage. Lesbian families are often unsure how to describe or explain their relationships to the outside world, because there is no culturally acknowledged language for these connections. Furthermore, lesbians are denied cultural rites of passage that mark and celebrate such important life events as when one becomes a couple or a family. Rather than acknowledgement given the same events in the lives of straight peers, there is often secrecy and anxiety mixed with the feelings of joy and love. There is little sharing of these events and little validation. Lacking this validation in the process of forming a family and experiencing the disqualification of people's denial or discomfort makes family building a formidable task. There is also a justifiable sense of insecurity and suspiciousness on the part of any lesbian toward the outside world. Lesbian mothers are always aware of the potential for devastating intrusion that, at its worst, comes in the threat of a custody case. When lesbians attempt to work out co parenting arrangements and share responsibility for the children, they become more visible and run the risk of rejection in their dealings with the outside the family boundaries. Schools, daycare centers, and agencies may refuse to see them or respect them as a family. The children, too, become participants in this closing off as day to day they deal with an awareness that their family is different and viewed by the larger culture as quote unquote not right. And as they get older and become aware of the need or wish to keep family life secret. The threats inherent in being visible and the consequence secrecy often attached to this anxiety can contribute to a high degree of invisibility. Consequently, the boundaries around lesbian families may be closed more cautiously and in self protective stance toward the outside world. The fact of the invisibility of the lesbian family as a unit gives this closed system aspect to the family boundaries an ironic twist. The cautiously closed nature of the system is maintained by the secret of the lesbianism and the ways in which outsiders often do not know the true nature of the family structure. This fact of self protectiveness, paradoxically, leaves the family boundaries excessively permeable and open to forms of intrusion that are largely unheard of in closed system heterosexual families. When the relationship between the parents is unrecognized, either because they choose to hide it or because others choose to ignore it, then no matter how defined the system may be internally, ex lovers, ex husbands, and members of the couple's family of origin can often walk in and out at will, as though the family unit does not exist. Many lesbians do not feel safe or justified in confronting those intrusions into their families. The invalidation of lesbian relationships inherent in outsiders' claims on the space and time of one or both members of the couple make it hard to take self and family seriously as valid, important entities entitled to integrity. Developing this self validation is an important family building task. The critical issue will be learning how to deal more constructively with this culture, a task that will not be accomplished overnight. For some lesbians, dealing with cultural forces involves first dealing with their own internalized homophobia. For others, it often involves identifying and using effectively the available supports. For still others, it might mean having an ongoing place to deal with the stress, either through a support group or lesbian mothers group, an informal or formal counseling arrangement, political activity, or simply a strong lesbian friendship network. There is clearly a need for lesbian parents to make their family solid from within. Although the challenge of this is great, the creativity and strength that lesbians bring to this task enhance not only family members, but also those in the larger culture who choose to learn from them the potential for growth in the appreciation of difference. Family of origin. Becoming a mother or a co parent affects any adult's relationship to the family in which she grew up. As with past quote unquote crisis, the announcement that a lesbian is to become a mother may either bring family members closer or distance them more. It may either open dialogue or close it down. Occasionally, the past difficulty of working through the grandparents or other family members, concerns at disclosure of their daughter's lesbianism, or the ways in which they have quote unquote adopted may have made positive connections more challenging to achieve. It has been my experience that basic family patterns will not alter significantly around the news of a pregnancy, adoption, or co parenting arrangement. However, once there is a grandchild, there tends to be more connection and, at least temporarily, more conflict or issues to work out. Grandparents may want to be involved because they feel quote unquote concerned for the child. Not surprisingly, this manifests as intrusion. They may also genuinely want to be involved because it is their grandchild. Not the way they dreamed of it, but their grandchild nonetheless. A lesbian mother is faced with numerous decisions about the connection to her parents that are more complicated than before because of her children's needs. All lesbians have to assess constantly where and how to take issues with the invalidating behavior that occurs in varying degrees and ways in almost all families. However, a lesbian mother may feel less able or willing to do this when the repercussions will be felt not only by adults but also by her children. This may operate two ways. Can she give in to exclusion of her lover from the family events in the ways she might have once when the children will experience their family as disrupted at an important time? On the other hand, can she freely protest typical invalidating behaviors, such as the assignment of separate beds in the grandparents' home, when the tension evoked will be experienced by the children and cause them anxiety? A lesbian mother needs to assess when to take a stand to maintain her integrity, because she will want to communicate that sense of family and other personal integrity to her children. There will be times, however, when it is right and reasonable to compromise in order to protect the children, just as there will be times when it is important not to compromise in order to protect the children. When the co parents' parents are involved as grandparents, the lack of language to describe relationships affects another generation. Both sets of grandparents may share the children's discomfort with explaining the family in a straightforward manner to friends, relatives, and neighbors, leaving the lesbian parents caught between denials. In spite of the obstacles, important relationships and connections regularly happen between the older and youngest generation. The lesbian parents' effort to find the balance between maintaining their integrity and compromising where this where there is a benefit are part of the struggle between a lesbian's need for adult autonomy and her need for these important people in her life. This developmental task differs from that of a straight peer in that the autonomous adult position for a lesbian is stigmatized and often feared by her parents. Ideally, lesbian mothers and their children will have contact with traditional extended family whenever possible. Children are enriched by connection to grandparents, adults, uncles, and cousins. For the child in a lesbian family, this is one of the ways in which they are like their peers. For the parents, these extended family members can be an important source of practical and emotional support. Couples concerns. Lesbians couple Lesbian couples who will be raising children together share common concerns regardless of how their family is formed. When the parents come to parenting as a blended step family or through a mutual decision to have a child together, the issue of what it means for two females to negotiate the role of quote unquote mother and co parent is complex. Both women have had a lifetime of socialization to be mothers, and often both experience a genuine desire to do so, which, practically speaking, cannot happen all at once. No matter who bears or adopts the child, both females may have their quote unquote mother stuff called forth. The fact that there is no definition of the role of co mother, as there is of father, a frame of reference even if a man chooses to refute that role, makes the negotiation of roles particularly hard for the co parent at home and out in the world. No matter how strong her presence and involvement in the family, it is she who bears the brunt of invisibility. It is she who disappears. It is she who is disenfranchised by the school, by both families of origin, by the outside world, sometimes even more painfully, by the children or by friends in the lesbian network who do not see her as a parent nor understand the unique pressures of her position on the family. Lesbians are still forging possible models for the potential of this parenting role. The co parent is clearly of critical importance in the child's life, and there is pain for both partners in the lack of acknowledgement for the joint struggles and joys by the culture at large. It is hard for either parent to know in advance what the negotiation of parental roles inside the family will evoke in them. The deliberateness with which they engage in this process together may have bearing on how well they will negotiate the difficulties that arise around restructuring a family system if it is a blended family and exploring uncharted water if it is not. Often, for a lesbian couple, this is not done as consciously as it could be, because there are few role models. In a blended family, the biological mother may not be ready to give up her power, control, and intensity of involvement, especially if she has been a single parent. At the same time, she may show great relief at the idea of not having to do it all alone anymore. Often, the co parent is confused by this message and has her own concerns too, as she experiences possible conflict between wanting to be an quote unquote instant parent and finding that it takes time to bond with the child and adjust to the major transition to parenthood. In any family formation, the co parent's bonding process can be impeded by the fact of her non legal status. She is often painfully aware that if she and the mother part, she faces a potential double loss because she has no ultimate power over her relationship with the children. This reality, which can be alleviated but not totally allayed by legal contracts, can highlight emotional risks that affect her process of commitment and attachment, especially if the women have decided to have a child together. Idealistic fantasies about being completely equal, that is, the same in the relationship to the child, may bring up difficult areas of conflict. These dynamics, should they remain unresolved, provide fertile ground for creation of confusion and divisive behavior on the part of the children. Often, this will manifest in the couple's relationship as conflict between the mother and co parent over the children's behavior and issues of discipline. When there is some differential between the parents' levels of interest in embarking on this new phase of the family life, it must be discussed. If there is a large differential in the level of interest in parenting, it is even more crucial for the family, so for the couple to project into the practical realities of their future together. Although lesbian couples do not have to be bound by traditional parenting roles, a full relationship between a mother and a partner who has chosen not to parent at all can be hard to manage and is clearly without helpful precedents. The couple, whether there is a large differential or not, should share their separate feelings about parenting and their fantasies and expectations of parenting together. A major aspect of this discussion should include how they envision sharing responsibilities, including the area of financial responsibility. Lesbian couples have many and complex different arrangements for handling money. Whatever their arrangements before the children arrived, shared parenting reopens this issue for most couples. The implications for the relationship of possible alteration of those arrangements make this an extremely important negotiating process. The couple can also look at stress points in their relationship in general and work with these problem areas to increase the stability of their relationship. When looking at the effect of a child in their lives, they will need specifically to imagine and project the effects on their relationship of such a change, especially with regard to their energy for one another. It is often hard to imagine the deprivation of time and contact in the context of a whole new set of issues and stresses to negotiate. This is true for any family. Role definitions and levels of involvement may be affected by the aging of the children as well. Adolescents who are more conflicted than they were when they were younger about their family being different may attempt to disenfranchise a co-parent who has been very active in their lives. When this occurs, it is critical for the couple to work together to make decisions that maintain the parent's integrity while still respecting the feelings of the adolescent. It is important to remember that although this process takes its most obvious form in a blended family, it also occurs in homes where two women come to the decision to parent together. In this latter instance, it may be unexpected for these concerns to emerge. Couples who have had or have adopted a child together report some surprise at the dilemmas they faced related to mother and co parent roles, both within the home and out in the community. Whatever final arrangements the couple does make will vary greatly from family to family and will be affected by such variables as the individuality of the women involved, the degree of interest each has in mothering, the age of the children at the time these roles are being developed, and the duration of time the couple has been together. The process changes continually as the needs of the parents and children change. The area of role definition in families where both parents are female is an exciting new frontier from which all parents can learn. Children's concerns. Children in a lesbian family will have the same stress of being different. Children do not like to be different, and this homophobic culture forces on the child a series of complicated negotiations with the outside world. No matter what a lesbian mother does to protect her children from ignorance, they will be faced with many decision points in their lives with regard to their family's relationship with the world, starting with, quote, who can know and who can't, end quote. The mother may face many varied reactions from the child over the years to this dilemma, including anger, silence, and anxiety. Some children may be concerned about how much ambivalence or feeling to show the parents out of loyalty and allegiance to family members. Whenever reaction to lesbian mother, Whatever reaction a lesbian mother gets, she has the task of meeting the children where they are and empathizing with their feelings about what being in a lesbian family means to them. She must help them develop coping strategies and not deny them the reality of their experience. Such a response can require added internal resolve and strength, as the mother will recognize the roots of her own and their own oppression in the world into which they are so badly fit. Some parents may experience feelings of guilt about what their children must deal with in this world. It is here that feelings of internalized homophobia on the part of the parents can fuel a dysfunctional response to external oppression. For example, whether these worries interfere with the parent's ability to provide discipline and set clear limits with their children, or whether they manifest as anger. No parent, straight or gay, can make up to their children for times of hardship, nor can their children be blamed for their feelings about hardships. Children who are born as the result of alternative insemination will have their own special concerns. Alternative insemination has been used widely for years by infertile heterosexual couples, and yet, for the most part, those children will not have been told about the facts of their conception. Lesbian children, conceived by alternative insemination, will not be deceived about their origins, and this is as it should be. If the donor is anonymous, however, the children will have to deal with not having a known father. This knowledge, and the issues of fathers in general, is of interest to the children. Adults adopted as children will have quite clear will have made quite clear the importance of knowing their origins, as they actively and persistently search for their biological parents. The reports of quote unquote something missing in their personal identities are not to be ignored. Not to know or have contact with one's own father raises external cultural issues and internal identity issues. Practically speaking, a woman must ask herself if she can provide her children with the maximum amount of information available in a way that acknowledges its importance. This may mean being quite conscientious and assertive about getting detailed information about the donor's medical history, ethnic background, physical appearance, work related interests, and, perhaps, reasons for donating sperm. At an emotional level, the mother must be able to attend over the years to the changing questions and feelings of a child who may not be satisfied to know only the family that she has been provided. There may be questions about the mother's choice as well as questions about the father. There is no reason why a child without a known father will not grow to a happy, healthy, and productive adulthood, especially if he or she is given the open help and support of his or her parents in dealing with this issue. An ignorant larger culture will expose children of people in oppressed groups to painful dilemmas and experiences beyond their years. Within the context of the lesbian community, children may experience unrealistic expectations of what they should hear and understand about this world. This may be a manifestation of the occasional lack of familiarity with children, but more important, it is an attempt to cope and help children cope with oppression. Many children develop a pseudo sophistication that appears to make them equal participants, but anxiety is generated by expectations of adult levels of awareness. Children need to be protected from adult oriented activities and conversations that are not appropriate for their age, both out in the world and within the community. Although this particular problem takes its own form in the lesbian community, with aspects unique to the needs of sorry, the needs of and the pressure on, this subculture, the general societal pressures on all children to be little grown ups, is the subject of much recent discussion. These are the primary issues with which, in my experience, the children of lesbians grapple. The issues all overlap with the concern of many children. Most deal with worries about being different, embarrassed at the quote unquote peculiarities of their parents, difficulties born of being made to grow up too fast, and, in many cases, absent fathers. For the children of lesbians, however, these worries are fueled by the negative judgments of the straight world. As is the case with the children of many oppressed groups, the mastery of these difficulties develops strengths. The children may bring these strengths to bear on the influence they have on society as adults who appreciate individual differences and respect the wide range of human potential. The responsibility of the therapist. As lesbian parenthood becomes more common, therapists are more likely to see a single lesbian or lesbian couples seeking treatment around issues raised by this possibility. Also, some families may encounter enough difficulty over the process of family building, especially in a blended family situation, to warrant outside help. When lesbians approach the psychological profession, the response and awareness of the therapist is of critical importance. The work of being a competent therapist with lesbian families begins long before the family even comes for treatment. Therapists treating lesbians have the same responsibilities as those engaged in cross cultural and cross class treatment. The examination of their own attitudes and values about the specific population before the work begins. What prejudices, stereotypes, preconceived notions, assumptions, or even fears does she have? Where did she learn them? What does the therapist know about homosexuality and lesbian lifestyles? There is much to read on the subject, some of it good, some of it awful, and all of it informative, either about lesbians or about the homophobic world in which we live. A lesbian therapist may find that there are leftover issues of internalized homophobia to deal with as she is confronted with a family's problems in therapy. As it occurs, this is an issue for supervision. This personal work is critical both in the therapy itself and in the relationships with the outside world. Therapists treating lesbian families may occasionally be called upon as advocates to outsiders, schools, courts, and social service agencies on behalf of the families. A sincere belief that there is nothing inherently problematic about lesbian parenting makes this task both easier and a trust building process with a family who may be justifiably suspicious of the psychological profession. Unless the therapist is fortunate enough to work in a setting known as a safe place for lesbians to come for treatment, there are some general issues around getting a lesbian family into therapy that need to be addressed. Lesbians have historically little cause to trust the psychological establishment, and it often takes a tremendous amount of courage for them to approach a clinic or other outpatient service for help. Often, they will not call until it can no longer be avoided, either because a referral source is pressuring or because a state of acute crisis has developed. In either case, the therapist has a potentially ten- tenuous relationship with her new client, and an examination of intake procedures forms the agency's general attitude, as well as the sensitivity of workers likely to have first contact, is critical. For example, can intake forms be filled out accurately by lesbians with children? Will the form represent, when finished, who is in the home and what their connections are, should they choose to state them? Or does the form routinely ask for mother, father, and children with no reference even to quote unquote others living in the home? If there is an intake meeting of clinicians, is there a listening ear for cases that might be lesbian clients or families, often not stated over the telephone? And are these cases assigned accordingly? Is there a public waiting room? Sorry, if there is a public waiting room, is there a sensitivity, especially in small community, to the anxiety of a lesbian couple being seen coming into therapy together? How can things be structured between therapist and client to minimize this added stress? These are just a few of the practical issues to be examined. If a lesbian mother feels the need to hide her sexual identity, the therapist's work and the outcome for the family may be so seriously compromised as to render the treatment ineffective at best and potentially quite damaging. When the lesbian family is finally in treatment, it may be that parents will want to investigate the therapist's attitude toward homosexuality. This must be responded to in a straightforward, matter of fact way. The client has a right to know if she is in a supportive environment. Should this concern not be laid to rest by the therapist's answer, the problem may be the clinician's response. The therapist must look at her own issues first and seek feedback from knowledgeable colleagues. The assessment of the lesbian family in therapy does not differ significantly from the assessment of any family, but in this instance, the therapist needs to develop the ability to view all that is being presented against the backdrop of gay oppression. Although the presenting problem may very well not be directly related to lesbianism, it is probably at least affected by it. The therapist must attend to that with which the family is specifically asking for help, while remaining attentive and alert to the special issues that also inform an understanding of the functioning of this system. When the lesbian family is finally in treatment, it may be that parents will want to invest. Oh, wait. Okay. Lesbian families take many forms, and it is extremely important to determine who the members of the family system are and how they view their relationships. Assumptions about parenting systems drawn from the traditional heterosexual models may cause the therapist to miss important, self defined extended family in the lesbian community. Although it may be a single parent or a couple who present for counseling, the family may be more complex than the therapist first realizes. The therapist's exploration of a family member serves two critical functions. It identifies what this family's self image is, how they see and describe themselves. It also allows the therapist to begin to counteract in the therapeutic setting the invalidation of the world. At times, the therapy itself is a rite of passage, often long overdue, a place where the family can be recognized and treated as a family. While respecting the defenses of the extremely closeted lesbian or couple raising children, in general, the therapist should overtly support and label the reality of this group of people as a family unit and help them to see the interplay between what they are struggling with and the stage of their developing system. It can be extremely illuminating, affirming, and relieving for the therapist to recognize out loud that it is not a simple task to negotiate such things as adding new members, defining roles with regard to children, and building a spousal and parental couple simultaneously when the world does not recognize the unit as a family. And finally, in order to do all of the above, the therapist must examine her own basic notions of family. What does she think constitutes a family? How and by whom is family determined? What are her values and beliefs about what a child needs to thrive and grow in the home context? What are the therapist's attitudes about lesbians as mothers? Many lesbian families suffer greatly from the disintegrative effect of not being acknowledged as a family unit, either by omission or by commission. It is critical, therefore, that this validation not be absent in the context of therapy, or the therapist will be working against self and client. Conclusion. There have always been, and will continue to be, lesbians who are also mothers. There have always been, and will continue to be, lesbians who are caring, competent, and loving parents of children who will grow to be full human beings with, perhaps, an even greater internalized sense of tolerance, justice, and the full flexibility of human potential than many of their peers. This reality, the reality of lesbian families, is a reality that is hard won. In a culture that is mother blaming as well as homophobic, lesbian parents have been the objects of literal and figurative assault and intrusion ever since the dominant culture chose to recognize their existence. The acknowledgement of this existence has been highly selective, however, and most frequently it has been invoked to punish. Here, the recognition has stopped, as a myriad of invalidating behaviors have been the primary mode of a relationship to the lesbian family. The miracle, like the miracle of the survival of lesbians themselves, is that lesbian families continue to grow, both in potential and in numbers, in the face of a cultural context that is hostile at worst and ignorant at best. This miracle is born of strength and determination. As more and more lesbians become parents, the responsibility of the psychological community, which has amply participated in the suppression in the past, to provide a healing response to the unique stresses and pressures of the lesbian families, becomes an incontrovertible fact. Those lesbian families who seek therapy rarely present initial problems that are directly related to their oppression. They present, like other families, issues of concern in the management of their daily lives and in the functioning of their relationships. Lesbian families are real families, and their presenting problems are real problems. These problems are exacerbated by the homophobia in the culture, but they cannot be resolved or explained away by an exclusive focus on the homophobia in the culture. The therapist who wishes to be helpful must have a respectful understanding of the backdrop of lesbian oppression and its impact of family building and couple problems, while primarily attending to that with which the client have asked for help. In order to do this, she must truly understand the contexts within which the lesbian family functions, the impact of those contexts on the family functioning, and purposefully be able to make these understandings available for the use of the family when relevant. Finally, in the midst of this critical awareness, it is imperative for lesbians and those who wish to support them to remember that being a lesbian parent is as unique as it is pains and assets as being lesbian. There is no satisfying trade off in life for the integrity inherent in being one's self and the power and strength inherent in achieving this in the face of these odds.